Welcome back to the Quarterly Call. All content is for informational purposes and is not investment advice. Please consult with an investment professional. Today, we're taking a closer look at Intuitive Surgical's first quarter earnings call for 2025. It was a pretty detailed discussion, and we're going to try and pull out the key insights for you. We'll focus on how they performed and, what's really driving their outlook for the rest of the year.
Exactly. We'll be drilling down into some really crucial areas, things like procedure growth, how many more ops doctors are doing with their systems, and what's happening with the launch and adoption of their latest Da Vinci models, especially that new Da Vinci 5. We'll also need to cover the Ion and SP platforms, see how they're doing, and, well, you can't ignore the impact of global trade dynamics, those tariffs, on their business.
Okay, so let's dive right in then. It sounds like the first 3 months of 2025 were generally pretty good for Intuitive.
Yeah, they definitely reported a strong start to the year. What was particularly interesting, actually, is that physician use of their products. It was right at the high end of what they themselves were expecting.
Oh, really? That's encouraging.
It is. It suggests, continued strong demand from surgeons and hospitals.
And it wasn't just one specific area leading the way, was it? I remember hearing about some particular strengths.
That's right. In the U.S., core general surgery saw pretty significant growth in procedure volume. We're talking about common operations here. And internationally, they also saw really robust growth across their markets. So it paints a picture of, like, broad, sustained adoption.
Right, that's definitely a positive sign for their overall path. Now, what about actually getting these, sophisticated systems into more hospitals? That feels pretty fundamental for future growth.
Absolutely. And they had a solid quarter for new system placements. The U.S. was a real bright spot here.
Yeah.
So it shows hospitals are still investing in robotic surgery capabilities, likely seeing that long-term value.
So the foundation seems strong. Let's maybe zoom in a bit on their main tech, the Da Vinci platform. The Da Vinci 5, that's been generating a lot of buzz. What's the latest on its rollout?
Yeah, the platform keeps evolving. The adoption of the new DV5 alongside their existing multi-port systems, that's a key part of the story. And we're also seeing, encouraging signs with their more specialized tools, Ion, for those delicate lung biopsies, and a really significant acceleration in procedures using their single port or SP platform.
Acceleration, okay. Can you put some numbers around that for us? Like how many of these new systems are actually landing in hospitals?
Sure. So they placed 367 Da Vinci systems in total. Out of those, 147 were the brand new Da Vinci 5.
Wow, 147 already.
Yeah. And 19 were the SP systems. They also placed 49 of their Ion systems. Interestingly, though, while the U.S. showed strong uptake, internationally it was a bit more of a mixed bag. Germany, the U.K., Japan showed some slower adoption signs on new placements.
Mixed international placements in key markets. That's something to watch. But what about the systems already out there? Are they being used more often?
That's a crucial point, right? And the trend is positive.
Yeah.
Utilization for the traditional multi-port systems was up 2%.
Okay.
The SPP platform, though, saw a really impressive 26% jump in utilization.
26%.
Yeah, big jump. And Ion was up 5%. So it suggests, as surgeons get more comfortable and hospitals integrate them, the actual procedure volume per machine is going up.
And all this increased activity, I assume that's showing up in their financial results.
It definitely is. Their overall revenue grew by a healthy 19% in Q1.
19%, okay.
If you break that down, revenue from selling the systems themselves was up 25%. That's driven by those DV5 placements and maybe a slightly higher average selling price. But what's also really important is their recurring revenue. Instruments, accessories, services. That was also up a strong 19% and now makes up a huge 85% of their total revenue.
85% recurring. That really highlights how sticky their business model is, doesn't it?
Exactly. It gives them a lot of financial predictability.
Now, everyone's keen to hear more specifics on the Da Vinci 5. What details did they share about how that launch is actually going?
The DV5 rollout seems to be going pretty much as they expected. They've placed those 147 systems, like I said, and already seen over 32,000 procedures done on them across different surgery types. They also hit a milestone, installed their first fully integrated system that combines the hardware and software for a more, seamless experience. Includes an integrated hub and even a simulator for training.
An integrated hub and simulator sounds like that could really streamline things for the surgical teams. What other new capabilities are coming for the DV5?
Well, there are several pretty exciting features that are currently waiting for regulatory clearances. Things like real-time surgical video review for the surgeon, accessing 3D models during the procedure, and using these new visual force feedback gauges. The broader commercial launch of DV5 the one with the fully integrated hardware, software, and the capacity to meet demand, including trade-ins, dual consoles, all that's expected around the middle of this year. Regulatory stuff is still ongoing in Japan,
Hmm.
and they're hoping for European clearance towards the end of 2025.
Right. And force feedback, that's a feature surgeons seem particularly interested in. Any updates on how that's progressing?
Yes, force feedback is definitely a core piece of the DV5, and we're starting to see some encouraging, though early, signs of its benefits.
Hmm.
One study just at a single hospital showed patients having kidney surgery with force feedback had a significantly faster return of bowel function, hints at maybe less tissue trauma.
Interesting.
And another preclinical study suggested it could help novice surgeons improve their suturing, less damage, fewer errors, faster times. The broader availability of the actual force feedback instruments, though, that's expected more towards the end of this year.
Faster recovery, better training. Those sound like really meaningful advancements. What about all the data the DV5 can collect? I think they mentioned something called Case Insights.
Absolutely. Case Insights usage with DV5 is growing. It's been used in over 22,000 procedures already. This system captures video, data on how the instruments move, energy use, even force data, and links it all to specific steps in the surgery. So this really rich data set lets surgeons review their cases, find ways to improve, maybe develop KPIs, basically helping surgeons at all levels get better.
Yeah, it really sounds like they're using data in a powerful way to potentially drive better outcomes. Okay, let's pivot now and talk about the Ion and SP platforms. How are those doing?
Ion saw very strong growth, 58% increase in procedures. That's about 31,000 procedures in the quarter.
58%. Wow.
Yeah. And they got clearance in Australia, which is big. Plus, their first provincial charge code in China. China's still early days for them, focusing on clinical data, but that charge code is crucial for getting paid. Near-term priorities for Ion: driving use in the U.S., expanding internationally, and working on getting the system cost down.
Okay. And the single port SP platform, you said its growth was accelerating.
It really is. Procedure growth for SP jumped to an impressive 94% in the quarter.
94%.
I know. U.S. market solid, but international growth more than doubled. Really driven by places like Korea, Japan, and some early traction in Europe, too.
Hmm.
They also got U.S. clearance for a specific SP stapler for chest and colorectal surgery, which could open up more uses. And overall system utilization for SP was up 26% on average, highest in Korea and Japan.
Impressive growth across both Ion and SP then. Now, we kind of have to talk about the financial realities, especially with all the talk about global trade. What did Intuitive say about tariffs?
Yeah, tariffs are definitely a challenge. They laid out the impact of U.S.-China tariff stuff going into China, components coming into the U.S., plus baseline tariffs on other imports like from Europe, and even some tariffs on goods from Mexico that don't meet the USMCA rules. They estimate the total hit to their cost of goods sold for all of 2025 will be around 1.7% of revenue, plus or minus about 30 basis points.
Okay, 1.7%.
And they expect that impact to actually increase each quarter this year. So because of that, they've revised their pro forma gross margin outlook down to 65% to 66.5%. And they don't really see their mitigation efforts helping much in 2025, unfortunately.
Oof, that's a noticeable hit to their profitability. What about their wider financial expectations for the year? Did they adjust anything else in their outlook?
Well, interestingly, despite the margin pressure, they actually increased their forecast for procedure growth for the full year. Yeah, they now expect growth between 15% and 17%. That's up from 13% to 16% before. Factors driving that: performance in China, international capital spending levels, and trends in things like bariatric surgery. But, like we just discussed, the gross margin outlook is lower because of tariffs, but also higher depreciation from new facilities and just the mix of newer products they're selling. They also expect operating expenses to grow 10% to 14%, again, depreciation plus investments in growth. And CapEx forecast is $650 to $750 million, mostly for building facilities.
So more procedures expected overall, but margins getting squeezed a bit by these external factors. Sounds like they have a clear plan, though. Their strategic priorities for navigating this.
They do. Key priorities are really centered on that full commercial launch of da Vinci 5, getting the regional clearances, rolling out follow-on features. They're also really focused on driving adoption for specific procedures in specific countries. That means training, commercial efforts, market access work. Another big one is continuing to build out their manufacturing scale, keeping quality high, optimizing operations, new facilities in Sunnyvale, Georgia, plans for Germany, Bulgaria, Mexico expansion, and finally just emphasizing excellence and availability of their digital tools, like Case Insights.
It's fascinating how these global economic conditions really weave into their strategy. They specifically mention the capital spending environment and tariffs again.
Yes, exactly. While they saw strong U.S. demand for DD5 driving placements there,
Right.
they did acknowledge financial pressures and healthcare spending limits in some key international markets. Japan, Germany, the UK were mentioned. The China tariffs hitting their product cost and potentially making it harder to win tenders there, that's a major factor too. And they floated the possibility that some customers might have to rethink their capital budgets, maybe delay investments because of the trade situation and financial pressures.
But despite those headwinds in some places, their overall growth outside the U.S. still looked pretty strong, didn't it? What's driving that?
It was very healthy, yeah. 24% procedure growth, OUS. They pointed to strong performance in India, Taiwan, Europe, especially the UK, and their distributor markets. What's behind it? Things like engaging key opinion leaders, surgical societies adopting the tech, broadening the types of procedures done, and sometimes better reimbursement, like in Taiwan. But they did caution that those capital constraints in markets like Germany, Japan, UK could eventually cap procedure growth there, which just highlights why they're so focused on increasing utilization of the systems already installed.
Right, getting more out of what's already there. It's always interesting to see new growth areas pop up. They mentioned a couple after-hour surgery and a renewed look at cardiac.
Yes, the after-hours growth seems driven by this desire for everyone to have access to high-quality, minimally invasive surgery, even for urgent cases outside normal hours. Makes sense. And regarding cardiac surgery, there's this growing feeling that minimally invasive is becoming the best choice for more heart patients. So, Intuitive is making strategic investments there, seeing an opportunity for surgical innovation alongside what's happening in interventional cardiology.
Let's just quickly circle back to force feedback. You mentioned ongoing research. What's the latest there?
So they have 6 DV5 instruments right now with force feedback, chosen because they're used in a lot of different procedures. They acknowledged the early single-center studies are now moving to bigger multi-center trials. There's one listed on clinicaltrials.gov, for example. But it's important for people listening to remember, surgeons can use both force sensing and non-force sensing instruments on the DV5. And right now, how much force feedback is actually being used is partly limited by just manufacturing capacity as they ramp up.
Got it. One last quick point. They touched on potential Medicaid cuts. Any insights there?
They did acknowledge the discussion is happening, but basically said it's just too early to quantify any potential impact on system use, including robotics. They did note Medicaid patients aren't currently a dominant part of their overall procedure mix.
Okay. So it sounds like despite the various challenges, tariffs, market pressures, Intuitive Surgical still feels pretty optimistic long term. They even frame their tech as potentially part of the solution for hospitals feeling the financial pinch.
That's a really crucial takeaway, I think. Their argument is essentially, if you run your program well, our robotic tech can actually lead to a lower total cost for treating a patient episode compared to open surgery, and often even compared to standard laparoscopy, which, could be a compelling pitch for hospitals trying to balance tight budgets with improving outcomes and patient satisfaction.
Right. Helping on both fronts potentially. So just to wrap up our discussion then, Q1 2025 showed strong performance overall, exciting progress with new platforms like DV5, Ion, SP moving forward. But at the same time, Intuitive is clearly navigating a pretty complex global scene with those trade tensions and economic pressures, especially internationally.
Precisely. They're showing resilience, focusing on innovation, trying to be efficient. But those external factors, particularly tariffs, are definitely going to be something important to keep watching as the year unfolds.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Quarterly Call. For more episodes, please remember to rate and follow our show. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.